exist or for survival. Now, the situation in India, now I come to migration. Now I come to Indian story. Women in migration and reverse migration. Migration is a global phenomenon where we have the entire mobility of the people. Now, it is also true that gender is an important aspect of this migration. When do women migrate? First of all, men migrants are there. 10 women migrate. But when women are migrating, but sometimes migrating with male partners, sometimes they are left behind, sometimes they migrate on their own. Now, women component of the migrant population has a close relationship with a number of female-headed households. The process of this unequal kind of inequity in urbanization, the process of inequity, the process of deprivation has increased the deprivation of the women migrants more and more. Particularly if we refer to the bricklane workers. Bricklane workers, we have many women migrating. We have the story of sexual exploitation. We have also the story of these labor-gender relations. We also have the story of wage inequality. We also have the inequality with respect to conditions of work. So women who migrate from rural to urban areas sometimes are empowered than their rural counterparts. That is, they used to feel that they are much better. Even if they stay on the streets of the city, they felt if these footloose labor, if she is a part of the footloose labor, she felt it better than their female counterparts in the rural areas. And the rural areas also saw that the perception was that she is earning. But now they are sent home. Now they are underpaid. With the whole experience in which they went through in India, we have a story of reverse migration. But when it's a story of reverse migration, they are obviously facing the rural distress. But when they're facing the rural distress, what will happen? What is the introspection? Men may not come out, but we will have women coming out. Or is the story going to be reversed? Earlier, men came out earlier, but women stayed back. Now, since the factories are not, they have not gone into the labor augmenting policies, and there is predicted job loss. So will the men come? Maybe women will be the first to come out. So there is not only a reverse migration, a reverse story in terms of the labor-gender relations. So women may come out as domestic workers, as other kinds of workers, as many other ways. That is, I'm coming to another very important problem. That is, at the same time, we also have an increase in trafficking. This has happened in the whole world. So it has also happened in the whole world. So the trafficking network is also active, very active in the pandemic. And although we have lesser reports in India, but there is no reason to assume that the story is not there if we don't have reports. Sometimes the story comes later. Sometimes we know the information comes much later. But there is no reason to we assume that what is happening in the whole world will not happen in India. This denial has not paid us anything as far as COVID is concerned. Now, more women will be visible in the workplace, but pushed to more vulnerability, justifying the theory of Engels' reserve army of labor within the families. So will it not be Engels' private property theory working out again as we see them as the reserve army of labor? Now, flexible labor laws and labor reforms will affect working women more and more. If you look at India, the labor laws are being changed. And as the labor laws are getting changed, we have longer working hours for labor. Now, women had been suffering from unfavorable conditions of labor for a long period of time. So unfavorable conditions of labor are not uncommon to women who are working now in the vulnerable conditions. So more women will be pushed to absolute poverty and they will suffer from food security. As food security and hunger is also becoming a problem with respect to COVID situation. So there will be intra-family household discrimination. There will be more disputes as you see more people coming into the villages in reverse migration. So the size of the cake has become smaller. And if the size of the cake is becoming smaller, lesser and lesser will be available for the women in the family. So they will be suffering from absolute poverty and they will suffer from food security. So the story will not be the same which we experienced earlier as far as migration with respect to India. Now, the indirect impact of changing labor gender relations. There are some indirect impacts. So these are the direct impacts that I'm talking about. So will this see the eyes of our textbook relations when we look into the labor market? One is the huge polarization in the labor markets. What kind of polarization I'm talking about? There has been a huge difference between the white-collar workers who worked from home, WFH, work from home, who are working from home. You can call us who are working, who are sharing our ideas from home. So we are teaching. So as you can see, the white-collared workers, the IT workers, the office workers who are working from home. Now, when the other vulnerable women who has lost their jobs, who has completely steeped in more uncertainty, their men have become unemployed. They have to bear the brunt of the whole lockdown process. They have to bear the brunt. So as you can see, there is a huge polarization and huge inequality. This is not between men and women now. There's also between women. There's also between women. So you have a huge polarization in the labor markets. And trafficking of women and children. Fear of increasing girl-child marriage in future. This has already happened. This already happened, and actually, since data is not there, but this already happened. But from my field experiences, I'm sharing with you this idea that already girl-child marriage was there in India. Lowering the age of the girl in marriage has been there has been in the dialogue in the rural areas as well as in the between the urban poor. Now why? Because we are reducing one mouth to feed. More women will be visible in non-farm informal employment, which was already there, which will become more vulnerable with new labor reforms. Because men will be back in the farm work mostly. Now I'm talking about the place where the state where I'm staying in West Bengal, which was affected with Amphan cyclone, as you have known. So there are in the coastal areas, they have lost their homes. So it is not only the food security, it's also the security of losing homes. So their homes have been flooded away. And the men of these families are trying to find somehow work. Women are just waiting to come out, even in this age of reverse migration in the city. Um, COVID situation is much better there because they are remote areas and they are not in contact. Uh, so it's in contact with these kinds of disease. So they are just waiting for everything to settle down, for transport to ease out. They will leave their homes and they will migrate. So it's a different story of reverse migration that I'm trying to share with you. So more women will be visible there. Men will be visible in the farm work. So we will be heading towards a 2021 census and 2011 census and 2001 census saw in the non-farm informal employment, non-farm sector, rural non-farm sector employment, And in the rural non-farm sector employment, it was men mostly, there visible. But the story will the story change? I cannot assert that the story will change, but I'm just making introspection. That will the labor-gender relations change as far as the farm and non-farm relations are concerned? So vulnerability of women in prostitution. So where are they going? How are they living? The tremendous food insecurity in which women in prostitution are living throughout the world. And um, they are relying on relief by charitable institutions, by activist groups, but they have become vulnerable. So will they change occupations? Where will they go? Where will they go? What are the work in which they are doing? So see, women have been thrown out of these kinds of work also. The work which women were doing, which were helping them to make earnings, since there is a reverse migration, they'll be thrown out from that work. But that will not, but these throwing out of the work will will provoke them to look for other kinds of work. And whatever kinds of works are there, they are more hazardous, they are more vulnerable, and the changing labor reforms will be applicable to them. So emerging new labor gender relations, we are at the post-pandemic crossroads. What will happen to the neoliberal labor gender relations? Will we be able to remain with the neoliberal labor gender relations? That is, the way in which capital was enforcing its way and suppressing the question of labor, commoditizing the whole labor, delocalizing production. See, the global is local, now the local has become. So delocalization of the production, delinking from the production system will has changed the concept of home also. When I was talking about work from home, this immediately raised the question, what about the home-based workers who used to work from home every time, with or without pandemic? But was it working from home? Due to the polarization in the labor markets, we don't call them work from home. So they are paid less as they are working from home. They are not provided with the means of production. But the white collar workers may be provided with the means of production, may be provided with the kind of setup that they needed for their to work from home. Maybe this can be set up, but home-based workers and work from home are two different categories. So is this getting us a new way of looking into the labor gender relations? Will mainstream labor economics treating gender as a category and not a social construct embedded system? This remain or new labor economics will evolve? Will we see the eyes of a new labor economics where the earlier questions posed by the feminists, the earlier questions posed by the feminists, that this commoditization and looking into gender as a category is not helping us to look into the labor relations, the way in which labor is linked to production and exploitation of female labor. This question has become more sharpened with a post-COVID situation. Will feminist questions of labor, gender relations, and sexual division of labor be considered as mainstream economic theories? Now, what I'm trying to talk about is the emerging political economy, engendered and post mainstreaming. We had a whole post gender budgeting scenario. We had a whole situation of gender mainstreaming and mainstreaming gender into the policies. So if we look into this gender mainstreaming policies, what what kind of policies were there? They were looking at women as a beneficiary approach. And this was, although there was some criticism that women specific policies, some gender specific policies are there, and accommodating women into the broad general policies. So, will this mainstreaming gender move us to welfareism? That is, will gender women be included, or we have more women specific policies? So, how will it change? How will the revival change in terms of policies? As far as we looked into our stimulus package, the stimulus package didn't mention uh, the kind of problems that I shared with you with this. That will labor gender discourse include the question of vulnerability? What is happening to vulnerability of the kind of women per se, of the poor women in the country? If we look into the global inequality, and what is happening in India is also the same. What we see is that we have a huge rise in inequality in the country, of economic inequality. This inequality is reflected in terms of how you look at labor economics, how you look into the labor, how we look into the relations between labor and capital in the country. So, if we look into this inequality, COVID-19 has exposed this inequality. The impact of COVID-19 has been so severe with respect to a particular section of the population. It has been severe also with respect to the other section of the population, but it has been particularly severe with respect to a large part of population who were in the other end of inequality, that is, who are poorest of the poor. Many poor will become poorest of the poor, and there is a signal that we will be moving more towards absolute poverty. The vulnerable occupations also go against sustainability of the system. The vulnerable occupations, if we increase vulnerability, will this be sustainable? Can you sustain by not keeping the health and education rights and democracy of the population of the country? Can you sustain? The whole question of the dip in GDP, the whole question that how women and men are working with this total decrease in GDP growth rate, that Moody's rating, what has been happening in our country, and so on. So the whole discussion on that. And if we look into the Reserve Bank, uh, the crux of the problem is what you had before the pandemic situation. Now, what India is experiencing, in India, we have exposed what was hidden in the pre-pandemic situation. Second, India is also a part of what is happening in the whole world. So, as you look at India, if you look into the labor gender relations, particularly coming to the labor gender relations and engendering labor economics, we cannot dissociate the social problem of increasing domestic violence from the fact. If we look into the paid, unpaid, and underpaid work, which has increased within the households, this is increased for the work from home women, and also for the women of the households where you do not have economically better off people. So you have these domestic incidences of domestic violence from all sections of the population. So what is happening is that labor economics post-pandemic situation will be more steeped in the patriarchal social structure and patriarchal social construct in the economy. So this is a part of the gender labor relations, and will this see the eyes of the textbook? Will we be able to change our textbooks? Now, capability deprivation in terms of deprivation of right to health, right to education, and right to shelter. This deprivation, keeping the deprivation intact, keeping all these intact, keeping the discrimination intact, keeping the polarization intact, this will go against rebuilding the economy, whatever stimulus we are trying to give. Now, what I shared with you is the new emerging ideas. People are writing about this. People have people are writing what has been the impact. But we have not been able to look into how will your textbooks will be changed, whether we will be looking into our old theories or not, whether we will be revisiting our old theories or not. So what can I conclude for the day today? The discussion today. Capitalism and labor capital relations will have to change to survive. Capitalism will be changing. The way capitalism is existing in the whole world, it will have to change. This is very obvious from the discussion of many, and there are many theories have been floated, like surveillance capitalism, disaster capitalism, and the way in which capitalism can be the more welfare states, more welfare rich in the approach, by looking into growth with equity, that growth cannot be dissociated from inequality. So these questions have already come up. The question of sexual division of labor also need to change within this capitalist framework. Now, the sexual division of labor between production and reproduction. If we look into the reproduction, the way if the women migrant laborer gave birth to the child and then walked away with the child home. So, is this speaking of the sexual division of labor? So, can we keep the sexual division of labor? We cannot maintain the capitalism will not be able to maintain the sexual division of labor. So, is the sexual division of labor being turned into otherwise a vulnerable sexual division of labor? It's not only division, it's a discrimination. So looking at labor as an independent labor market and looking at gender as a category, will it be able to give answers to our questions? Because if we combine growth with labor, labor means employment and employment means production. Production means growth. But whenever the gender labor relations is like that whenever we try to talk about women and labor, we do not relate this to labor, employment, production. We always talked about livelihood and bearing the brunt of the family, making both ends meet. So these dialogues will have to be rewind now, because now production, employment, labor, and this division, this dichotomy will need to be intertwined with each other if we try to look for a recovery from the post-pandemic situation. So as far as the discussion is concerned, so I end this discussion, and I am looking forward to questions. I shared a lot of my ideas. I shared a lot of my concerns with you, and thank you very much to allow me to share with you my thoughts. As we know, we are all within our homes and bearing the brunt of the thought, listening and thinking on our own. It's always good to talk to you, talk to friends. It's always good to share the ideas. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ishita, for such a wonderful and comprehensive presentation. in the context of COVID and the pandemic, what kind of initiatives are required to engender the labor theories. In fact, we have been observing in this COVID context the visualization of the care economy, be it the nursing or the sanitary workers. The most neglected female labor now are much sought after, and people are looking for. So, to a certain extent, there has been some kind of visibility, but at the same time, equally, there is a pressure at the private context or the private space. So this paradox continue, and so Dr. Ishita has beautifully brought out the kind of deprivation that is sustaining and which are actually contributing towards the kind of the gendered labor economics. The mainstream labor economics, she very much emphasized how it is actually treating women or gender as a category of analysis. The development discourses very much emphasize on that. So just taking that alone may not be sufficient. She claimed, and the social stratification and the labor need for reorientation of the labor theory, taking the labor as a process, and the power, the gender relation only be contributing towards engendering, and that are to be there brought out in the theories and the textbooks. And thanks to this pandemic, and these issues were very much exposed, and it doesn't mean that we must have the pandemic experience to bring all these, but that has to happen naturally. She did highlight about the job loss, which is very much horrifying. Like in the quarter itself, there is a fall of 130 million, and it may lead to or increase to 305 million. That is really a huge one, and so there is a need to attack this vulnerability by looking for or identifying survivor strategy. And she very much emphasized on the reverse migration. And Meera Velaidam will talk on Monday, 15th, on this reverse migration. So, to a certain extent, it is already happening, and it is also distress and forced. It is not that they are very much interested, and there is an change in equation like form and non-form labor, how there has been a reverse, and women migrate outside, though they are footloose, but still compared to their counterpart in the rural area, they are placed better, at least with some security of income and other things. And she highlighted also about clearly brought out the kind of the demarcation, like the work from home and home based workers. Work from home is of course, it's for white collar, and the means of production are being provided, whereas it is not for the home-based workers. So the neglect has been significantly on here time and again on women, and irrespective of women bringing significant income to the households, their contributions are not recognized, not enabling environment is being provided, which we have been witnessing. And she did talk about the trafficking and the child marriages, some of the areas in which has been working also, and emphasized on the need for flexible labor reforms to be. And of course, there are several regulations, and how they are also, you must be knowing, the labor code bill is out, and today we are having another whole day program there in Kerala. I got it on labor law regulations. So Kerala has been there in the forefront in addressing all these issues. And she claimed how the political economy, the emerging political economy, to be focusing on these various social sectors and strategically important sectors, and reorient, be it education, health, or food, or shelter security, so that sustainability is possible. So without depriving the kind of or keeping them intact, be it in the labor market or in other development sector, without reinforcing or reorienting the labor theories and bringing them into the textbook, it is difficult to change. That is what she ultimately concluded, and she also provided some food for thought. She did bring about the commercial sex workers and the kind of other works also. So, thank you, Professor Ishita. And now it is open for discussion. You could refer the chat box, and there are some questions,
Yes,
observations.
I'm just looking at the
Yeah,
chat box.
please do
Yes,
that.
yes. Yes, the question that the first question that I'm looking into the factor is that one is how to overcome the labor gender challenges. See, challenges can be overcome if we recognize these as challenges. The problem with the labor gender relations throughout has been a denial and the non recognition of the patriarchal embeddedness of the labor gender relations. So, if we recognize this, it's high time now we recognize this. We're in the middle of a crisis, so we have to recognize this. So, recognition will help us to overcome. Recognition will be the first step. Now, what are the different dimensions of these of empowerment to the gender aspects of migrants' labor and polarization in labor market? First of all, let me tackle the question of polarization in the labor market. Polarization has been, there is a huge there are two kinds of labor market emerging. First of all, I'm talking about this dichotomy. But I don't know whether there's a plural sector it will be evolving in years to come. We don't know. But it's a dichotomy, means two kinds of labor market. That is the first labor market with having protections, social protection, but facing challenges and with care services and work from home, etc., which has domestic violence, facing those kinds of challenges. The others who are facing challenges both ways, that is challenges which are in private as well as the public, that is challenges with respect to the conditions of work and also of job lostness, and also moving into more vulnerable work, as well as the challenges of domestic violence and extended care services, paid and unpaid and underpaid work. So there is a polarization in the labor market. An alternative to capitalism, that alternative to capitalism that will ensure a fair and just society. Yes, strongly, capitalism has not brought a fair and just society. There is no illusion to the fact that this is a bad capitalism and a good capitalism exists, which will help us. Capitalism will survive through extracting or through benefiting the profiteering class. And one of the ways in which the profiteering class has extracted its pie is by pushing women into the vulnerability, more and more vulnerability, and more exploitation. Now, alternative to capitalism is not coming out of economic conditions and by changing economic textbooks or by changing theories, or it's a part of the people of the country. It's a part of the political process of the country. That is why in this COVID situation, we also find something which is not a discussion, which is not a part of my today's presentation. That is a depression of democratic space. That is a surveillance and democratic space, the depression of the democratic space. So alternative to capitalism is the answer to the kind of crisis in which we are led to. What will be that alternative be? The political processes will be able to take. Now, the socialist countries have been able to combat the disease and have been able to take care of the healthcare facilities, private and publicize, extend the public sector. Investment in health have been very successful in combating. We can see the effect of Vietnam. We can see what has happened in Cuba, in China. We can see these effects. We can also see the effects in other countries like New Zealand, Japan, etc. But definitely you cannot find a socialist country which has not been able to combat. We cannot find a socialist country which has not been able to combat. Even Spain uh, took over all the private hospitals. So at least the basic fundamental health cares have to be taken over by the state. So a redefinition of state will need to come. Now, then a question that engendering gender equality in professional employment, can policy rise to this occasion? Now, gender equality in professional employment, if the gender equality is a part of the policy, you see the eyes of the policy as far as the basic fundamentals is concerned. Of course, professional employment is the first area where it can be easily accommodated. So this is yes, another question. How would you reflect on the question of researching informal sector work, economy, women workers through online mode? Now, this is a kind of question which I have been dealing with. That how would you reach the informal sector economy women workers? Most of them are not having a smartphone. I was looking at the data. A small percentage is having access to online method. So how would you do a survey? How would you do research? So that's a separate thing. I think we have to innovate. We have to innovate out. The social scientists need to innovate out this method, and we will. I think we can. Science can and statistics will be, and quantitative methods as well as qualitative methods will surely be evolving around these lines. Now, I think, yes, the comment on the status of the craft industry on India during this pandemic, especially the women workers who were doing this with all their household responsibility. Yes, the craft industry in India, what has happened in the craft industry in India is also happening with the other kinds of work that women have been doing. Underpaid, unpaid, paid work intermined with each other. They are all intertwined with each other. Within the 24 hours, women have to combine all of these. And as far as the paid work is concerned, the onus is on the craft industry. Is that the problem is that the earning, the marketability of the products is also depending upon the women. How would the women sell out in the lockdown period? One activist movement is for the SAG and the small entrepreneurs who have taken loans not to postpone repayment of the loan EMIs. So this has been a part of the movement. So the lockdown has affected them. Lockdown has affected their earnings. So the kind of things that has been I have been pointing out is that the intertwining of all of these paid, unpaid, and underpaid work. If we look at all of these intertwining and the tremendous stress in which the women of the country, of the entire globe, are being exposed, one aspect need not be ignored, that is the mental stress and the mental trauma through which the women have been going on. So will not addressing this trauma help us to understand, help us to revive, help us to get out of this problem? So keeping half of your population in a traumatic situation, can the gender labor situations, can we go into the labor production, employment, growth, this kind of a path? Can we move into this kind of a path? That this has to be taken care of. And I think I have addressed most of it. No, there is some, do you think that reverse migration would bring a structural change in the labor gender relations in the urban areas, or would it resume its previous shape? Definitely it will bring a structural change, the reverse migration. Another question is how capitalism would be profiteering without increasing the overall demand and purchasing power of the people. Would it further increase the gap as far as gender inequality? and other forms of inequality, the caste, class, ethnicity, etc., are concerned. I completely agree with you. The social stratifications go with the gender. Gender is not a category. It is visible through class, caste, ethnicity, and other kinds of stratification. So it is visible through these stratifications. And if we reinforce the stratifications, is a reinforcing all kinds of stratifications. And of course, capitalism will try to reinforce these. And we have to increase the supply as well as the demand. We are lockdown has locked the economy from both the demand and the supply side. Then that is the problem. So that is the problem. And this has increased the vulnerability of women workers more and more. If we talk about empowerment question, I'm always critical of the fact in which we are trying to look into the empowerment as working poor, increasing working poor. So even if the women is now working, can we call this empowerment? So this is also a question that is made visible in the pandemic situation. I think, Mani, I have answered all. Is there anything else which I left out, or anybody wants to ask anything? I
I
think I
think in
have.
the chat box, these are the questions, and you have answered all the questions. And
Yes, I think I've answered.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yesterday, Professor Atre, I was also pointing to the same, like in the reverse migration context, it is necessary to invest more on the rural infrastructure. Say, for example, MNRG is to be expanded and extended, wherein you can focus on improving the infrastructure so that some kind of improvements will be taking place. I'm talking in the context of the people who have migrated back to their own home cities, and definitely there will be shortage of employment, and disguised unemployment would be the kind of situation which will be taking place. Of course, I agree with you that there will be structural changes, and particularly in the context of reverse migration. And even the industries, the corporates, the export processing zones also prefer women labor for they are being cheap and for other positive aspects. So that particular issue is still there and concerns are there. But the question is, as one of the participants also raised, is how to improve the purchasing power. And as you rightly pointed out, this gap of demand and supply, and we are already facing. And in fact, when I interacted with some urban domestic workers or other wage earners, it was revealing that there is no even source for borrowing. For example, I'm suffering with food security. Whatever this PDS is giving, it is hardly sufficient for a week or so, and I have to go for borrowing since I don't have earnings. And so this even people are not there to lend. That is the kind of a situation which we are facing in the COVID context. And I think Ishita must have observed this in her research. And of course, West Bengal is first affected in terms of the natural catastrophe also, and it has been repeatedly. That's what I was talking in the morning, that nature also targeting West Bengal so much, where people are pushing into further vulnerability. So you can sum up and close, and we will go for the formal vote of thanks. Do you want to say any
Uh,
further?
no, I think I will conclude today, and if any other questions, and I think I've addressed all the questions, and I'm not here to give you an answer today. I'm going to share with you, I've shared with you my concerns and my understanding out of the situation and the way in which we used to look into our textbooks. Will we see a change in our textbooks? If you don't see a change in our textbooks, then it will be a retrograde step. So if we want to move forward in both our discourse, ideas, and if we want to bring back our experience from the fields into the textbook and into the classrooms, we must change our basic books. We must change our theories. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishita, for end note, but for that end note, and of course, we need to also, as on the one hand, as a researcher and the academician, and on the other, activist, you need to also write to the policy concerns. At least we keep knocking the door and let it be heard or
Let
not.
us
That's
knock
a
on the
different thing.
doors. Yes.
Yeah. And so now over to Dr. Shubha to propose the vote of thanks, and then Dr. Prasanna to wind up. Dr. Shubha?
Yes, yes, yes. I'm here, madam.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
On behalf of Department of Human Studies and Beck Bharadas University and the webinar participants, we thank Professor Isita to share and presented the gender dimensions of, in general, labor economics and very particular to the labor theories. And also to she thank you very much to created the platform to rethink and revisit the existing theories and textbooks and the need and importance of reconstructing the entire perspective of labor and labor economic theories and labor market. Thank you very much, Professor, to join with us and share the very, very critical and gender perspective way of your thoughts and ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. It was nice meeting.
Thank you, Ishita. Now, Dr. Prasanna.
Yes, ma'am. So, thank you again. Thank you from Bharadasan University. Special thanks to the resource person, uh, Dr. Ishita Mukhopadhyay. I think I'm pronouncing it right now. So, thank you, ma'am, for sharing your valuable views with us. And I also thank all the participants for having participated, and also co-organizers, the Department of Human Studies, Professor Mani Meghale ma'am, Professor Murugeshwari, and Professor Shubha. And as you all know, the recorded version of this video will be available at our website, that is www.beckrusa.in. And you can watch it, and probably if Madam Ishita shares the PowerPoint, we'll also put up the PowerPoint for reference by anyone.
Yes, I've already shared it with Professor Mani Meghale, so it's available.
Okay, ma'am. So I'll get it. I'll get it from Madam, and we'll put up the video and.
I'll share to Dr. Prasanna right away.
Yeah, yeah. Please send me the link also. Mani, please send me the link.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. We will send you the link, ma'am. It is in our website. We'll just send you the link of that video, so it will be hosted on our website.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will be meeting again on 15th, the same time, 11 o'clock. Dr. Meera Velaidam will be talking on reverse migration. And I also inform the participants that there will be an exam after the 7-day discussions. That is 16th at 11 o'clock. That will be a multiple choice question for 1 hour test, and 50 questions will be there. And you can prepare, because you have been hearing, and almost all the videos will be available on the website, and you can refer them, prepare for your questions, exam, and we will see on 15th. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.